Greetings, all. Responding to your conversation about mental health crises, it's very interesting that one of the most common themes in your conversation was that of stigma. And it's unfortunate but true that it's not possible to address the issue of mental health crises without also addressing the dangerousness of stigma. You had a fair degree of consensus with regard to the harmfulness of media portrayals that equate mental illness with dangerousness. Of course, stigma is what is dangerous, not the illness or the person with the illness. Nonetheless, people with mental illnesses are often portrayed as being dangerous. This poses a real threat to people. For example, as you pointed out, interfacing with law enforcement. Several of you described stories of the tragedies of people calling law enforcement to assist with a family member in crisis, with the result that the interaction between that family member and police officers is fatal. Christy describes the court hearing in which the person in mental health crisis was disrespectfully treated, resulting in further trauma, and quite shocking that people in that particular system describe people with mental health issues as, quote, mentals, unquote. Jamie points out that there are contrasting scenarios that are possible and take place when people interface with police officers. There are many positive scenarios as well as negative. Another theme that you discussed is the fact that stigma interferes with engaging in prevention. For example, as you pointed out, crisis planning is very important, but some people will resist crisis planning simply because of the stigma related to acknowledging, much less dealing with mental health crisis. It's the same dynamic, of course, that applies in resistance to making an emergency kit, for example, or end-of-life planning. As Tori points out, media portrayals are very powerful, and often people confuse the portrayals that they see in the media with fact. And that's generally true. If we don't have opposing information, then the misrepresentation of people in the media becomes what we know, and informs our perspective in ways of which we are completely unaware. This underscores the importance of public education. And you discussed the need for more public education, as well as professional education, training law enforcement, for example, particularly helping professionals distinguish between intoxication symptoms and a mental health crisis. And it's important to note also that symptoms can be the result of a drug interaction. As you pointed out, it's there's harm created not only by lack of planning, but also by the insufficiency of services or the lack of coordination of services. You discussed the importance of empowering families and others in a person's support system to create their own RAP plans. And specifying how that support system would be enlisted in times of crisis. As you pointed out in your conversation, it's important to know what the signs are of impending crisis, what the possible triggers are, and it's also important to be aware of when signs of the crisis are dissipating are occurring. You had a very useful idea of not only having the support system members become aware of warning signs, but of actually formulating a series of questions, and depending on how a person answers those questions, you could proceed in one way or another and gauge where he is in terms of needing intervention. You also discussed the importance of simply being there and riding out the crisis with a person, and making sure that he's not alone or she's not alone during that time. Cecilia points out the importance of record keeping and having the history easily accessible, so that everyone in the support system and also the professionals have access to the same information. We discussed the importance of trust, and Scott points out how important it is to be mindful of the language that we use. This idea, for example, of battling mental illness as opposed to managing mental illness. And those of you who were in human behavior will, in 350, will remember a conversation we had about the definition of coping as the ability to manage stressors that are perceived to be taxing or overwhelming one's ability to deal. And it's very important that we understand that there are many challenges that we can't overcome. And so the language of managing challenges makes more sense and is not defeating to people when they find that it's not possible to overcome or, quote, win the battle. So this was a very interesting conversation, multifaceted conversation about mental health crisis and all of the things that we as social workers need to keep in mind in working with people and working with other professionals and in engaging in public education and offering a counter narrative to stigma-filled narratives about people with mental health issues. So yet another excellent conversation.